Okay, so the Earth has suffered some sort of event and it's no longer habitable. And George Clooney plays a scientist who's in a lab who refuses to evacuate. He's kind of just a guy that's dedicated to his job at this laboratory, this observatory. Meanwhile, in space, the mission that was set out to look for a new planet that we can live on, one of Jupiter's moons, they're out there. They found that one of the moons actually is habitable and they're headed back to Earth. But Clooney's like, whoa, wait a minute. You guys are coming back to Earth? You don't want to come back to Earth. There is no more Earth. Earth is no longer viable for you. So don't come back. Just keep going back to that planet, that new moon that we found, and stay there. But he can't reach him. So he decides, you know what? Let me head over to this other station where there might be better communication signal. So he gets himself dressed up, goes to the frozen north, and makes his way to this other terminal, this other observatory where he can tell them, listen, don't come back. Do not come back. Stay up there. Meanwhile, they're up there like trying to, hey, what's going on Earth? Why aren't they talking to us? What's happening? They can't hear. It's a communication problem is really what it is. That's The Midnight Sky. That's pretty much the movie. I gave you the surface version of it right now, but we're going to get into it more on Film Fan next. Hey, welcome to Film Fan, my channel where I discuss all things film related, and my passion for such things. If that is also your thing, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate that if you haven't done it already, and that little notification bell so you know when I put up new content. All right, so The Midnight Sky stars George Clooney, directed by George Clooney. It's a Netflix movie, sci-fi thriller. I hesitate to say thriller because it's not very thrilling. And I hate to say action. It's not really a whole lot of action. There's a little bit of action, but not too much. So we're going to get into it and we're going to talk about it. I don't think I'll start this off by saying I'm going to do two things. I'm going to talk about the film from a general perspective. And then if you haven't seen it, then you can just turn it off at some point, right? Because I'm going to wind up having spoilers. I'll flash something across the screen, one of those big things that says spoilers, spoiler alert. So you know not to keep watching the video. But for those of you who've already seen the movie, I'm just going to share with you kind of really quick my thoughts. I don't want to make this a long video. I did a previous take of this and I realized that the video was way too long. And it's just unnecessary. All right, so we're going to get into it right now. All right, so this is Midnight Sky. It's based on a book called Good Morning Midnight by Lily Brooks Dalton. It stars Clooney. Clooney directs it. It's the seventh film that he's directed and starred in. Actually, I think it's the seventh film he's directed, sixth film he's directed and starred in. He plays a character named Augustine Lofthouse, who's a scientist who works in this observatory in this lab in the north. And 3 weeks, the film opens up, and 3 weeks ago, there was some sort of event. They call it the event. They don't really specify what took place, but there was some kind of event that basically wiped out humanity. Like Earth is pretty much done. Bunch of people at the lab where Clooney's character works, they all evacuate, so that you kind of see this evacuation thing where they're all frantically trying to get out of there. He volunteers to stay because he's actually terminally ill anyway, so he decides, look, I'm dying, I'm going to stay here at my post, stay at this observatory, and I'm going to do what I got to do. Because meanwhile, there's actually a space expedition to find a habitable planet that will be able to sustain humanity for the future. So I think we knew that the planet was fucked, so they wind up sending out this space mission to try to find a habitable planet. And actually, Clooney's character, Augustine, is responsible for finding that particular planet. I think it's called K23. It's one of Jupiter's moons. So this shuttle, the Aether, is out there with a crew, and they actually did figure out that K23 is habitable. It will sustain human life and it's fine. And they're now on their way back to Earth and kind of, you know, hey guys, it works. Let's all pack our bags and let's go up there. Problem is there's nothing for them to come back to. So Clooney's character realizes, hey, these guys are out there and they're actually coming back here, but I need to tell them, don't come back. Earth is fucked. There's no reason for you to come back. So he tries to communicate with them and he can't because the communication signal at the tower and the observatory he's in is not strong enough. Comes up with the idea of saying, you know what? Let me go to another observatory. There's another station. It's like a weather station that has stronger communications equipment. It's a bit of a hike in the frozen north, but if he figures if he can get there, he'll be able to communicate with them and stop them from coming back to Earth. So he dedicates his time there to trying to stop these people from coming back and make them live. Now, the movie cuts back and forth between what's happening with Augustine there at the observatory on Earth and the mission space shuttle crew Aether. Here's the thing. The there's really not much going on in the space sections. Like, it's a sci-fi movie, and it's not something you've ever that you haven't already seen. Like, if you've seen Gravity and you've seen Interstellar and you've seen these movies in space, it's not anything compelling. It's not anything really like, oh my God, like this is great. The sci-fi, the actual the cinematography or the way it looks and the effects, it's nothing fantastic. It's nothing that's gonna make you go, wow, that was different. That was beautiful. There's really nothing. There's some shots on the Jupiter moon that I think are actually kind of cool, and the way that looks and how that moon, the way that moon looks, I think that's pretty cool. But other than that, as far as the characters go, you really don't get involved too much in these characters that are on the shuttle. So I think that's a definite miss in the film. And then the stuff that takes place on Earth with Augustine, with George Clooney's character, it's just slow going. It's kind of like a trudge. It's just like, all right, is this going to pick up? Is it not going to pick up? And mind you, I don't have a problem if a film takes its time and there are some moments of silence where you're learning some things or you're kind of being immersed in some of the subtext and some of the things that are going on, but it's really not much going on here. It's kind of a snooze fest at times, okay? So with all of that said, that's pretty much the basis for the entire film. That's where it is. So if you haven't seen it, I would suggest turning off now, because I'm going to start talking about stuff that are spoilers. They're going to reveal some spoilers. So if you stuck with me and you watch this video, even though you haven't seen the movie, then great. But turn it off now and then go watch the film. I will tell you this. It's not something you definitely need to go see. You don't need to get on Netflix right away and watch it. You're not going to be missing it if you don't see it. I will say it's not a bad movie, but it's not anything fantastic. All right. So if you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch it. Turn this off so you don't get the spoilers. Or if you want to hear the spoilers and you don't give a shit, then so be it. Stay with the video. For the rest of you, I'm assuming you've already seen the movie. So the stuff I'm about to talk about is just kind of my take on the way I feel about the other events. Now, at some point, you've got that whole thing where Clooney winds up realizing that there's this little girl that's been left behind with him, right? This little girl pops up out of nowhere. He's in solitude. He's eating his food, drinking his coffee, getting drunk, doing his thing. He's on dialysis. He's doing whatever he does in his little private world. And then all of a sudden he finds out that there's this little girl hiding there and she's with him. So at first he's totally just like he immediately gets on communications and trying to tell people on Earth, like, hey, there's somebody left behind here. There was a little girl. She's probably part of someone's family. She should have been evacuated. Come get this girl. And you can tell that he's frantic. It's like he's no way he wants to deal with her. But it kind of like she warms, they warm up to each other. There's the best scene in the movie to me was a scene where they're eating dinner and all of a sudden there's like a little pea comes rolling across the screen onto Clooney's like area where he's eating. And she's like throwing peas at him, kind of like, but she's doing it really on the sly. All of a sudden they have like a pea shooting fight with each other. And I think it was really cute. And it was like a moment of like bonding for the both of them. But that was probably the best scene. I really like that. But yeah, he's with this little girl, and then he makes the decision where he's got to go to this other tower to get a stronger signal so he can tell them what's going on up on the Aether shuttle. He bundles her up, he bundles himself up, and he goes out into the frozen north to go to this other station. Gets a little hooky. I think a lot of that stuff was just, it's kind of like The Revenant. You got this scene of this frozen conditions and how is he going to get across and how is he going to survive. I thought some of that was kind of just hokey. It was slow. It wasn't anything that compelling. It was a bit unrealistic. I didn't think that girl would even come close to surviving, or like I just didn't think it made sense that she would be going out there. And of course we realize why it makes sense that she can go out there later on. We'll get that in a second. But the scene where he falls through the ice and then he damn near drowns in like frozen water, but somehow he's okay and gets out of it. I looked at that and I was like, there's no way anybody would survive that. You'd be dead within minutes if you submerged yourself and you fell through the ice in frozen water and then came out. Like, you'd be dead. But it is what it is. He makes it over to the tower, and I just feel this film could have been so much more. The idea that the revelation that the woman in space on the actual Aether on that shuttle, Iris Sullivan, is actually his daughter. Now, the little girl turns out, if you've seen the movie, the little girl is a hallucination. She wasn't really there. I think the thing, wrapping this up, I'm gonna get through it. I'm not gonna make this long. The thing about it for me that makes it a good film, well, not makes it a good film, but the element that I enjoyed was the idea that this is a guy who didn't want anything to do with people. He was kind of a loner. He was kind of dedicated to his work, and he was so dedicated to his work that he couldn't form like relationships with people and human beings, and he just had a tough time at that. Now, I didn't talk about it, but in flashback, you know, those scenes where, like, you know, we realized that he met someone named Jean Sullivan at some point. He dated her. You know, they were doing their thing. At some point, she had a pregnancy scare. She didn't even want to tell him that she was pregnant because she knows this guy is no way near ready to be a father, and he's so dedicated to his job that it would be pointless to tell him. Then we find out through flashback again that at some point he bumps into this woman and she lets him know that he has a daughter, but he doesn't want to introduce himself to the daughter. So he like totally just like, yeah, I don't really want to be bothered. I think that the best thing for me this whole movie is the idea that it turns out that his daughter is the one in space, and she doesn't know that that's her father. And yet she explains at the end of the movie to this guy, to Augustine, who she just knows as a scientist, like, you were the influence for my life. Like, you influenced this and you influenced that. And the fact that Augustine, you know, Clooney's character, is the one that actually discovered K-23, the planet that humanity is going to go and sustain itself on. All of these things, to me, make the good elements of the film. The idea that this is a guy who didn't even want his own daughter, or chose to not be part of his daughter's life because he was so dedicated to his work, yet his work and his sacrifice ultimately ends up saving his daughter, his future grandson or daughter, and humanity. So this is a guy who, although he chose to be absent in his child's life, he was not really absent because he ultimately ended up influencing her as a scientist and saving her life and saving humanity. I thought that part of this story was beautiful, and I thought that was interesting. But it's just the way it's told, the way it's put together, it just doesn't work. It doesn't hold your interest, partly because, like I said, the part in space with that crew, you don't actually connect with them, and you don't really feel any like sudden urgency. And I just didn't work for me as far as that goes. As far as Clooney's character goes, I thought he was interesting. You know, in the beginning, you're looking at it. I've seen other reviews and people talk about the idea that he was this depressed guy, and I don't think he was depressed. And it might come off like that. I mean, you see this film and you think that he's this old guy with a beard and he's depressed and he's in this, you know, he's all alone in his lab. But I think that that's what he wanted. It kind of reminded me of Burgess Meredith in that episode of Twilight Zone, super famous episode of Twilight Zone, where he is a bookworm and all he wants to do is read. He works in the bank, and then there's like some nuclear event and he happens to be locked in the bank vault, and then he comes out and everyone's dead, so he's able to read all he wants. Clooney's character struck me as not a depressed guy. I don't think he was running around skipping rope and having fun in the lab by himself. He kind of just trudged along through his daily life, drinking his coffee, getting drunk, eating his food, and doing whatever he had to do. But I think he was content doing that, and that was the point. He wanted to be alone. He wanted to do his work. And it all pays off in the end. Essentially, he basically saves humanity and saves his daughter's life, even though he doesn't know that he was that major part of someone's life. I thought that was beautiful. I think the film overall doesn't warrant anyone rushing out to see it. I think it could have been much better. I think the elements are there. I'm sure the book would probably read better and probably play better. There's probably more information there. But as a movie overall, it's just not that engaging, and you don't get too much into the characters. The sci-fi that's there is not really that interesting. It's not really a sci-fi. I mean, I guess it's supposed to be a sci-fi flick. I don't know. I don't think it was that great. Watch it if you want to watch it. If you've stuck with this video this long and you didn't mind the spoilers, and so be it. But for those of you who actually saw it, let me know how you feel. All right, go ahead in the comments below. Tell me what you think about Midnight Sky. Tell me if you think I'm, again, batshit crazy, or you actually agree with me. Let me know, and hit that like button before you exit, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that already. So that's it for me. That's it for Midnight Sky. It's not that serious. I think it was a relatively decent kind of story that was hiding there, but it just wasn't executed very well. That's how I see it. All right. So until next time on Film Fan, remember, if there's a movie that's out that's 25 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old or whatever, if you've never seen it, it's a brand new movie, so you should go ahead and watch it, okay? So watch the movies, lose yourself in the movies, find yourself in the movies, and I'll see you on the next Film Fan.